Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another episode of Voices for Excellence. I am your host, Dr. Michael Connor, CEO and founder of the Agile Evolutionary Group and proud host of VFE. And today's guest, it took a while for me to get her on because, her calendar is booked, and I'm talking about capital BOOKED. But we finally got Amy Dujon on Voices for Excellence, a person I truly admire, specifically what she is trying to accomplish with her in the district administration group with regards to executive leadership and ensuring that we have executive leaders matriculate into the role, or even if they're long tenured superintendents, assistant superintendents, chief academic officers, and now the newly developed Principals Leadership Institute. And Amy's going to elaborate on that. But it is with my absolute honor to see a great friend, a sister in the game, and a person I admire for the work that she does, Amy Dujon. Amy, I got you on. Listen, all right, and to my audience out here, it's harder to get a meeting with Amy than Barack Obama. Okay, so we got Amy on. Amy, how are you,
Michael? Honestly, the honor is all mine. Thank you so much for your patience and perseverance in getting me booked. But I could not be more humbled than to be here with you today in these next few minutes, just to talk about the profession and what we're all doing to try to build up our fellow brothers and sisters out there who are fighting the good fight, that are in the work every day. So every time I'm with you, Michael, you just make me want to be better. So I just want to thank you for that. Like when I hear you speak, when we're together, it's like I need to push myself to learn more, do more, and be more. So I appreciate you and the way that the things that you do for me that you don't even know. So
Amy, thank you so much for that. And to my audience out there, Amy is what I call an instructional pedagogical czar, with what she knows. She is an author, impacting the work in the field, more broadly impacted the industry in totality. So Amy, those words coming from you just absolutely means everything. So we're going to get into it, right?
Let's do it.
My podcast is kind of like, I like to say, unconventional, because it's more of two nerds, I like to say, getting together, just unwrapping education for asynchronous professional learning experience for my audience. But always start out with a fun question, Amy, right? And with your diverse level of expertise in the education ecosystem, specifically your experience, your depth and breadth and experience within the industry, being an author, the face of DA and the Dolly Institute. But I want my audience to know something that they might not know about you, right? And what is Amy Dujon's excellent and innovation song that describes your leadership signature in the industry?
So this is a hard question, because I think there's a couple that I would love to do a mashup of, but really, if Imagine Dragons, Whatever It Takes, it is so, there are just so many pieces of those lyrics that fit who I am, and just the context of my story of what I came from, just from a single parent home, and I always kind of see myself as the underdog and pushing through whatever it takes, but also just that mentality of, we're going to do what it takes, wherever, whenever, however, whether it's for the leaders or for the kids that are in the building. That's kind of it. I'm a little bit of a racehorse, which the song talks about. I always have bigger dreams and visions than sometimes I think I have resources, but that doesn't limit me. So I'm always looking to push the envelope, to think of what's next, what's better, and knowing that there's always room for improvement, right? We can all be coached, we can all change, we can all grow, and so that's me. One of my favorite lines in it, and I pulled it up because it's just so profound. It says, "I'm an apostrophe. I'm just a symbol to remind you that there's more to see." And so that's what I like in that song, is thinking it's always you can take a breath, but there's always more.
Absolutely.
Beneath what you see.
Absolutely. No, whatever it takes, right? And I think that, when we look at education now, right?
Mm,
And, this is the second year. If I like to contextualize it, Amy, as the AC stage of education after
yeah.
COVID-19 and these compounding variables, right, that
Mm.
we are seeing in education. Moreover, because of the pandemic, I think we have to really do whatever it takes, right? That radical altering of systems, instructions, traditional functions, roles within the ecosystem. We have to look at things fundamentally different so that we can meet the needs of Generation Z and Generation Alpha. And it is whatever it takes, pushing the envelope, as you said. And going back to this, I am just a thimble, right? I love that. Can you just elaborate on that for that line? Because that resonates with me so much. So if you could just unpack that just a little bit more so my audience can really get a feel of how that quote just hit me.
Well, for me, I think we look at people in certain positions or we see like organizations and the way that they're moving and it's we look at people and say, oh wow, I'm never as good as like or I'm not that, we especially as a female leader, right? We get that imposter syndrome and so that idea, that notion of like I'm just a symbol of what people could be, like how you can rise above but also the fact that just what you see, where you see me and the things that I'm doing or where I see you, that's not the total context of who you are, right? There's so much underneath each one of us that our histories, the way we've experienced the world, the way that we look at the world to come, that we have to stop and pause. I think that's where we see a lot of kind of that almost like a sandpaper discourse that happens in what we're seeing in education, where we're having a hard time seeing people's point of views and there's so much dichotomy. I think that when we take that second, with in the fact of an apostrophe, right? Just to pause, take a breath, and realize that I need to contextualize like this person's seeing the world from a view of something that I might not have experienced the world through. But also the fact that there's just so much that we have not untapped, right?
Yeah.
When we look at education, there's so many things that we're still doing that we've done for the last 100 years, right? We might have changed the technology behind it, but we really haven't radicalized, right, what we're doing. And
Absolutely.
I believe, like you, that we are on the cusp that if we don't start doing that now, that is what it's going to cause. It's going to take for us to keep up with the way that technology and society is pushing and moving. We are going to have to fundamentally stop and think bigger about
Absolutely.
what education can be and what it should look like and feel like. And that's scary, right? That's a
Absolutely.
scary place to be, but there's so much that is untapped right now.
You're absolutely right, Amy. Right, and I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront, right? Because if we really don't do anything, it can be catastrophic, right? And I don't like to use
Yeah.
that word or associate that word in the education realm because we always do what it takes. But if there are inaction, right, collective inaction, or this strategic, calculated risk of thinking big for this radicalization in education, it can be catastrophic. So thank you for presenting that, Amy. But moving on, right? So I know now, right? I got to get your correct title because I admire your leadership. I saw somewhere vice president, right?
Yes.
Can you elaborate? Oh, wait. First of all, congratulations,
Thank
right?
you. It's recent
Yeah,
promotion.
awesome. Elaborate on that, please.
Yeah. So when I was director of just the Leadership Institute up until midsummer, where I took on kind of overseeing the editorial content and direction with University Business Mag editorial and our DA editorial. And just recently was promoted to vice president, overseeing the media and event side of our the Leadership Institute side of our education portfolio, which is really exciting for me. So learning some new industry things that I didn't know before and pushing my leadership a little bit here. So hoping to continue to grow in this position. to really have a bigger impact, right? To really set some strategic direction around what do leaders need, like what type of material and content are they craving. And so doing a lot of deep dives, pulling our member base in, talking to leaders like yourself, how can we start to help leaders forecast out and start thinking, months in advance versus I feel like in the last at least 2 to 3 years, we have been on such a defensive firefighter mode, right? That if we can finally kind of start to help our leaders get into a more offensive stance, right? Yeah. That we can start to do the things that we need to innovate and move forward. So it's a very exciting, I think with anything like this, you get excited and I have a million ideas and things that I want to do. So luckily I'm surrounded by folks who are like, that's great, Amy, but let's keep it, come on. 2024, that sounds like a 2025 thing. We love that. But I am never that one. I'm like, ooh, I see a need and I'm like, we can fill it. Like, how do we fill that need? And that's what I want to do is constantly be looking and remaining agile so that we can meet the needs of leaders. So it's exciting.
Congratulations, Amy. I tell you, I just participated at the last Institute, Thali Institute. And it was, I tell you, you and your team, phenomenal. A1, top notch. I just love actually just going there because not only am I learning and engaging with other practitioners and executive leaders, but just the organization of the events, Amy, are phenomenal. And of course, you being the host, the event leader of it, you just make the environment so fun. And it's good to have that network of leaders come together and the organizational structure and how it's operated. Top notch, Amy. And my listeners out there, if you are an executive leader or if you are a leader, I know Amy and the District Administration Leadership Institute is starting the Principal Leadership Institute. Please engage in that because all tiers are supported. But Amy, I really want to get to this rooted question, right?
Sure.
Around, the work that you're doing, the work that Dolly is doing, and what we're seeing in the education ecosystem, which is immense turnover and various executive roles. Even now, when we're looking at this turnover rate, is at the site-based level, right? And I love how now you added that new leadership thread to support principals because you're seeing these alarming metrics, right? This precipitous dip in leadership, and whether it be the superintendent all the way down to the principal. But knowing these alarming metrics, Amy, you kind of articulated it when you were describing your new role as vice president. But how is the vision of the DA Leadership Institute supporting the ecosystem to sustain, develop, and more importantly, retain leaders during these polarized and politicized times in the AC stage of education?
Well, it is a vast question, right? And a lot of organizations trying to do what they can to try to support. And so for me, and we've talked about this a little bit before, Michael, the podcast is, I talk about it and there's a lot of noise when you're out there. There's so much noise coming at you, whether it be from community, politics, everywhere. And so it's so important as a leader to give yourself space and permission to get into a place with other leaders where you can shut the noise down and you can focus on the work and you can really think about, what is my next best step and think about how you're growing and supporting the folks that are within your organization. And really the Principal Leadership Academy, it came out of I have a heart for building leaders. I do. I think that, it's almost like running a small system, as a part of a bigger district. But what I've seen since post-pandemic, and this is my take on the world and the way I've seen it is, we left when COVID hit. Before that, many of our organizations had really, and even our school buildings had great systems in place. Like we had systems for accountability. We had systems for, our recruitment and retention, and all of these things were in place. And then COVID hit and we disrupted and we innovated in 3 days. We got people up, we got kids online, we got teachers online, we did all these things. And then when we were able to open back up, it's almost as if, in my point of view, we expected the systems that were there to just pick back up where we left off.
Right.
And we failed to acknowledge the fact that those systems broke and they crumbled, right? And when we came back to a different environment. We had now introduced a world of, you can teach virtually, you can learn virtually. And not that those things weren't happening in places, but we disrupted a system and then tried to go back to an existing system. And I think when we sit down and we acknowledge that, what we failed to do is to realize we needed to start building the systems from the ground up again. We had to reinvent for what we were about to meet. And so that comes into play when we think about even just student behaviors and the way that we're supporting them, the adults in the organization and the supports that they were going to need coming back. And so what I found was there's a lot of building leaders, and with the turnover that started to happen as a result of that to no discredit of theirs, they're strong leaders, but they maybe would not have been put into that position as quickly as they are now. And so they're lacking frameworks. They don't understand how to build a system from the ground. Like, how do I put a system that's in place? How do I come in and look at what's happening and identify whether or not there is something missing that isn't there? Or is are there things that I need to just tweak or fix? And so they end up unintentionally causing more disruption because they're trying to impact culture and they're trying to do things and they're stepping on things that they don't even realize. Right. So how can I help those leaders, right?
Yeah.
Enter into that building, take a bigger look, right? Start to look up and out, and to empower the other informal leaders around them to start taking on more. So what I find is we have got a ton of hero leaders out there. We have got leaders who are trying to do everything and be everything to everyone. And that's not sustainable.
Right.
It's just not, whether you're in the superintendency, the district office, or a building level. You can't be everything to everyone, and you can't be the single point of failure. You just can't. And so we've got to start thinking to helping these people realize that though at the end of the day, you have to live with those decisions and the consequences of the instructional and just organizational decisions you make. If you're not building the capacity and starting to put real systems into place, you're going to burn out. And so are the people around you, right? Like, they start to feel distrust because you're not allowing them to carry part of that load. So that's really where the need to support principals came from. Is I actually, one of our member districts asked me to come and do some work with their principals. And as I started working with their new principals, the other principals were like, we need this. And they just haven't been fed, right? Because they have been so busy feeding the people in their buildings and making sure that kids are safe and okay, and that the teachers are safe and okay, and that they'll stay, they're not going to leave, and they're not going to have a ton of vacancies. That we haven't fed the leaders enough, and they need it. They need their cups filled. And so this is an opportunity for them to come to really focus on themselves as a leader, the impact that their leadership has on the culture and the way that things are progressing in their buildings. And so it's been really neat to see that, and to have leaders reach out afterwards and say, you have no idea how much I needed this. Like, I needed this for me to sustain, to move on. And so that's really what the vision for me for the Leadership Institute is that we create these spaces where leaders can come together, learn from each other, but really, really be able to kind of block out that noise and find what they need to make their next best step forward, right? And that's what I try to create in all of the events we do, whether it's a summit or an academy, is to create those types of spaces.
Yeah, Amy, great job with that. I really love the fact that that level where leaders can just come in and just really focus on development, focus on learning from each other. The shared environment where you can be able to be you, right? To be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And, in an environment like that. I really appreciate where you said the noise, permission to shut the noise down. right? Because if you think about it, whether it be being a principal, building leader, whether it be at that executive level, it's really hard to shut down the noise, right? We talk about it from a data sense. You want to ignore the noise and pay attention to the signals that are embedded within those data sets. Same emulation, we want to be able to shut it down, really be focused on the learning in here. The experts that you bring in, Amy, and thank you for that, right? Because I think that when you gave a really good explanation where, I just wrote down, we need to be able to build the literacy and capacity of our leaders with regards to developing systems, right?
Yes.
And I to my audience out there, Amy highlighted a sentence that I really want you to focus on. You are not the single point of failure, right? And whether at the principal level or even at the superintendent level, that really resonated with me, that we can't be hero leaders. It's not sustainable. And of course, looking at it from that single point of failure, I think that a lot of us, right, because we're so immersed in the work, because we do whatever it takes to get the work done, when we don't impact families or students the way we want to, we feel like we are the lone failure with that. And thank you for highlighting that. So, yeah, go ahead, Amy.
And part of that too, Michael, is, we then are giving everything to our job and to the building or to the district. And the people who care about us the most, the people who are behind us, they wind up getting what's left of us instead of the best of us, right?
Absolutely.
So we come home and we're still because we're trying to do it all. We're distracted. We're not giving our time to the loved ones, and that's why we burn out. Because
Absolutely.
we lose the sense of who we are outside of. I always tell people, you're a whole nut, right? You have to be a little nutty to get an education, but you're a whole nut. It's not all about your job, right? There's other parts of you that keep you nutty. So you got to feed those parts too.
Absolutely. And Amy, when you said that, right, hero leaders, right, I reflect back to when I was a principal and superintendent, those two roles. I would literally put in a full day on Sundays, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would go in at 9. I'll never forget this, go in at 9. And I would probably get back home when the second round of football games are on, which is around 5 or 6 Eastern Standard Time. To everybody on the West Coast, around the 1 o'clock games. And we know on the West Coast, the 1 o'clock games are the late games for you guys out there. But Amy, right. I want to expand on, maybe not a lot of people know this about you, right? But you are just an instructional guru. And
I love me some instruction.
There we go, sister. Now this might extend to 3 hours with this question, but
double episode, 2 episodes. It's a 2-part series. Let's go.
Part 2 coming up, part 2. But you just have a wealth, and I mean a wealth of educational leadership experiences, serving in a variety of different roles. But I want to unpack your book, right?
Okay.
And I don't even think many people know you are an author. Yes, Amy is a geek out person. If you want to talk instruction, call Amy. But your book, The Gritty Truth of School Transformation, I love the title, The Gritty, right? The Gritty Truth of School Transformation, 8 Phases of Instructional Rigor. Now, what are the meta themes, right, around your book? And pragmatically, how can I take the 8 steps to improve my learning organization or even school to impact all?
So, it's that my book is really a reflection of the work that I did as a principal. And so at the time, I thought that I had drawn the short stick. So I was a new principal. It was like the week before teachers came back, and my area superintendent called me and said, "Hey, we've got this awesome opportunity. We're going to select a couple of schools across the district, and I picked you from my region." And I was literally said to him, did I draw the short stick? Like, was I just... And he said to me, he's like, "Well, if I'm being honest, I selected you because, one, in our area were some of the highest, like, most vulnerable schools in the district." And he's like, "I can't put more on them. And of all my other principals, I knew you would tell me whether or not this was garbage or not, right? Like whether or not it was worth it or not. So I said, okay. You're a new principal. You don't tell your boss no. You're like, I'll just do it. Like, I'll show up. And I went to the first day of orientation, and we were a Marzano school, like our district. That's what we use for our teacher evaluation, our leader evaluation. So I was familiar with like the terminology of the model. But when we went and met with the organization that was doing these what we call demonstration schools,
Yeah.
they really kind of introduced us to this idea of like digging deeper into the framework and actually like understanding the strategies that are within his framework and how to apply them, coaching teachers and how to do it. And I was like, I was like at your classic good to great school.
Yep.
It was an A school. It had always been an A school. In fact, I had worked in transformation schools my entire career. This was the first time I had landed in an A school. And I say this with absolute regard, but this school was an A school in spite of the instruction that was happening there. There were good teachers, great teachers in this, and they were doing good work and they were working hard and they were awesome. Like you would walk in and be like, Amy, this, and they were. But this was an opportunity for us to say, we can be even better. Like we can be good and we can get better for kids and better for us, because I'm a firm believer that you've got to constantly be honing your craft, challenging yourself. There's always something to learn. And so we got this opportunity to do it. I dug into the work, and it was a ton of learning the first year, of really digging into Marzano's framework, his high yield strategies, and understanding that. I was blessed to have him walk my building a couple of times and be in his presence. And for those people who have used him as evaluation, I was like, he gets a bad rap. He's a super cool dude. He is so fun to be around and smart, but really started to challenge what I thought I knew about good instruction. So, I love it when leaders say to me, good instruction is good instruction, right? You just know good instruction. And I thought I knew good instruction until I started down this path and working and really undoing everything I knew about teaching and learning and then trying to put it back together. Again, Dr. Marzano, he and his wife wrote a book called The Inner World of Teaching. And he talks about, we have scripts in our minds, like for what teaching and learning should be. When we go to a restaurant, we have a script of what we anticipate, how that encounter is going to go. And we can go to a different restaurant, but it's still the same script. We can go to a different classroom, but it's still the same script. But when we have to rewrite a script, when we have to edit and read, that's the hard work. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not, here's a new, textbook or new materials that we're purchasing for you. This is literally changing the way that you approach your instruction, your planning, the way that you approach the way kids should be engaging around content. And so that is the work of the book. That's what I talk about, is the struggle, the productive struggle that happened to really impact the way that we were looking at instruction. And it really started around this idea of thinking about the way that students are engaging in the world outside of the school building. What are they experiencing? We talk about preparing kids for jobs that don't exist. And we can say that all we want. But are we preparing kids? Are we building up the skills necessary to encounter a world post-secondary that we can't even imagine yet? Right? What are those real skills? And what are we valuing in the instruction that we're doing now? So the things I find when I walk buildings across the country, and I do it frequently, and we value compliance, right? We value kids to come in, to be quiet, and to sit and to do their work. And there's nothing wrong with compliance. We have to be compliant, right? Like I have to be compliant. I have to meet rules. There are rules and there are things that in society that I have to function. But we stall out with our systems maturing when that's all we value, right? Yeah. So we did a deep dive around like looking at the way kids encounter the world outside of us. What do we need to change about their experiences in our classrooms so that year after year we are building those skills that we know they need to make. And I'm sure you've seen the economic forums, like their list of what skills we need to be developing. And so pre-COVID, as you've very much outlined in your work, we were looking at problem solving and decision making and communication and collaboration, all of those things. And now post-COVID, it's really around curiosity,
Absolutely.
lifelong learning, resilient agility, the ability to shift and to be agile and flexible and but still creative thinking. And how often are we actually asking kids to be creative, to play, to be curious? How often are we encouraging the adults that are planning the lessons to be creative and to play?
Yeah.
And so the book, the 8 phases of the book are really the phases that I identified when I was able to sit down and look at it after I left, to say these were really markers in how the work happened. And the truth of it is the entire organization does not go through the phases at the same time, right?
Right.
So it's really anchored around the understanding of Cotter's work, right? Your first followers, then you've got, your coalition of the willing. You're always going to have those resistors, and looking, and the lessons that I learned as a young leader, a green leader, as a principal, in leading truly transformational work. I didn't know what that was. And it was me having to challenge my own beliefs, ideas, and knowledge of instruction.
Yeah.
With a group of teachers who are willing to let me learn with them, right? Yeah. That was hard to say, I don't have the answers. You're going to look at me and the answers, I don't have it, but we're going to figure it out together. And so this book really, these 8 phases talk about that kind of map that we took through it. And so, everyone always talks, when they read the book, they're like, oh, phase 3. Oh, because I call it the mud. You get in the mud, right?
Yeah.
It gets real muddy for a while. And you reach this point when you're trying to truly transform, where you get stuck, and it's either you're going to go back to doing it the way that was easy, that because that's it, or you're going to push through and you're going to get to the other side. And that's sticky. And so the mud is a place, I think, almost as an industry, we have been stuck for a while right now. We are in the mud, and we've got to figure out whether or not we're going to push through and transform, or if we're going to continue to try to go back to traditional practices and make those work. And I'm here to tell you, we got to push through, because once you get through the other side, it is so worth it. The rewards are so much better when you have that vision and you're able to get there. So I know I'm kind of like all over the place, but I get super excited as I talk about these things.
This is great, Amy.
I think what happened for us too, we went through that first year, which was really, really hard, but then this joy and excitement came back to the profession, where teachers were empowered. They were making decisions. I'll never forget, I knew things were really changing, and we can talk more specifics about what that change looked like in the classrooms, but I'll never forget, I went out to parent duty, drop off, and I walked back into my office, and I didn't call a meeting. I didn't ask them to come. I walked into my office, and I have a picture of it. I had a teacher from every grade level circled around my desk. They had just taken over my office, and they were vertically and horizontally planning to make sure that as they were approaching a common standard, that they were meeting the actual grade level expectations in their instruction and what they were expecting of kids to do. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But it was at that point that I knew I couldn't be the one to drive it anymore, right? And so the second half of my book really talks about, you have to stop being the hero leader, and you've got to start empowering others. So it's really just that journey of leadership that you do when you really are looking at sustainable transformational change.
To my listeners and my viewers, the book is entitled The Gritty Truth of School Transformation, 8 Phases to Instructional Rigor. Amy just gave a small caption of it. Yeah. Please purchase it, because again, her instructional acumen and prowess, you will actually see that within the content of the book. And also to my listeners and viewers out there as well, this is an answer that you want to rewind and play back again, because There are so many, I like to say, nuggets that you can take with you immediately. One of the major nuggets that I learned, Amy, just from your response, we have to be able to learn, to unlearn, to relearn, right? And especially now where we talk about that in the AC stage of education and that whole level of productive struggle. But I think what really resonated me as kind of, I like to say, a mega theme is moving away from compliance driven instruction. And
Mm-hmm.
Amy, that is something that I have been really trying to unwrap, right? Whether it be from a systems lens, now even down to the classroom level, because when we look at the key attributes and characteristics of Generation Z and Generation Alpha, one of the priority points within their characteristics, their collective characteristics, is relevancy, right? Relevance. Now, we know what Gen Z, Gen A are like. I have a son that is in Gen A, and I know what relevancy look like for him. And if we collectively continue to implement or double down on the traditional mechanisms of education, the industrial model elements, which is compliance driven, right? Again, we go back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. We're going to be in this catastrophic stage of imploding education simply because we're choosing compliance over engagement rather than engagement over compliance. Experiences for skill, new experiences for skill development, creativity in education. I always say that there's two curse words in education. I like to say the T word and the C word. T word is transformation and the C word is creativity. And why? Because standardized curriculums are driven to only improve assessment scores. And guess what, Amy? Your school is an A, right? What gives a grade for a school, Amy, right? Please go ahead and elaborate on that.
I mean, at the end of the day, we are no different than any other industry, right? Our end product is student achievement. That is our job, is to, when kids come in at the beginning of the year, leave smarter than with more skills and more knowledge than when they came in at the beginning of the year. And when we drill down to the fundamentals, that is it. And so, but what is an A, right? Like I used to look at it, I'm like, so if an A school means that only 57% of our third graders are reading on grade level, is that an A? Or that only 45% of our Algebra 1 students are passing? Like, would you accept a 45% as an A on a test grade? You wouldn't. You wouldn't do that. We lower those standards that, we've got those bands that the state will then adjust because this is where the majority of kids performed, right? So now we're going to adjust and say the difference between that's not mastery, right? Like I will get on my soapbox about stop giving points for bringing in note cards. That doesn't tell me whether my kid has mastered your content. How do I know that they know the standards? And that was the work that was just eye-opening to me. Do I have student evidence? Do I have the receipts in the day-to-day instruction that they have mastered this standard and they are ready to be assessed on it? Because most of the time, the answer is no.
Right.
And then we just keep pushing through and pushing through and pushing through. And it drives down to no fault of anybody's, we're not asking kids to produce in classrooms the evidence that we need to tell us if they've mastered, right? We are blindly trusting, and there's a lot of really great curriculum companies out there and content that's being given, but we blindly trust that the questions that they're asking and the way in which they're asking it is going to tell us whether or not kids have mastered it, and it's just not. That's not the case. We needed the evidence. If it's really simple to me, Rigor is super simple to me, like in getting kids there. I talk about the 4 T's of aligned instruction. If we can make sure that the target, we start with the target, right? The what is it that we need kids to know and do? What's the task? What are we asking them to produce to show us that they know it and they can do it? What is the talk? What are they saying? Are they using the academic vocabulary? Are they asking the questions? Are they pushing their thinking? And then in every content area other than math, we're looking at the text. Is it grade level appropriate? Is it worth reading? Or in math, it's the conceptual understand. It's the thinking. Do they understand the thinking behind and why they get there? And so whenever I talk to schools, I'm like, when you can get the 4 T's right, and it's all driven by a fifth T, which is taxonomy, which I did not understand. And I had my master's until I did this work, how key that was to knowing what level of thinking kids needed to be at, right, in the classroom. It changes when you as a leader start to unpack that and say, okay, this is the target and it's at comprehension. Are kids performing? Are they being asked to do things at retrieval? Or if it's at analysis, are they producing at retrieval and comprehension? Are they ever given the opportunity to really think and produce at analysis? And the answer is most of the time they're not.
Right.
We're not doing it. We're not giving them the opportunities to do that. And then we wonder why on the assessments they sit down and they can't think that way. And the other part of it is, if we're going to continue to honor compliant engagement versus cognitive engagement, right? The two totally different things. If we continue to honor compliance versus cognitive engagement, where kids are really talking about content, and we don't, Michael, you and I don't do anything without talking with our colleagues, without thinking out loud, without processing. Right. Yet we want kids to sit for 6 hours a day and be quiet and to do their work. And every now and then we'll let them turn and talk to their partner, right? Or we'll let them, oh, you guys can work on this together. That's not the engagement they need. They need to grapple with the content. They need to talk about the content. Wait, here's what I think this means. What did you think it means? Absolutely. That's what we as adults do. Those are the skills that create curiosity. Well, why would that be the case? If you're right, then why am I wrong? Those types, which are what the strategies, all those research-based strategies are about, right? Getting kids to grapple with the content. And so, we've got to start, again, undoing the way we think about what classrooms should look like and sound like.
Yeah. Well stated, Amy. Well stated. My listeners, please rewind that one too. Great definition of compliance engagement versus cognitive engagement, but something that hasn't really been talked about. And Amy, thank you for bringing that up. The 4 T's, yes, target, task, talking and text, but again, the last one, the intentionality around taxonomies, right? And then even going deeper when we look at taxonomies, differentiation around modalities, taxonomies, and modalities working together. But I want to continue, Amy, because again, like I said, this is a treat just to have someone with your level of expertise on my podcast regarding instruction. I want to unwrap now, moving to now, I like to say this disruption, right? Exploitation of instructional rigor. Yeah, incorporating AI and digital emergent taxonomies. Yes. How now can we, when we talk about cognitive engagement, when we talk about the 4 T's underscored by this taxonomy component, right? And now this new element of artificial intelligence, we're seeing large language models with generative AI being incorporated into the schools. What does this look like in your definition with instructional rigor and creating an equilibrium with new emergent taxonomies and AI in education?
So I'm so glad you asked this, because like my thing right now is we got to stop trying to fight AI. We got to stop thinking that it's going to ruin education. We got to start worrying about kids cheating, right? Like, I'm sorry. You got to let that go. These children, we're never living without this technology ever again. Right. It's here to stay, and it's only going to get bigger and smarter and more complex. And so if we don't, just like in any transformation, start to embrace it and figure out, okay, how do I use it? How do I teach kids how to use it responsibly? How am I going to show them, okay, listen, you're going to write a paper, but you're going to use AI, right? We're going to teach you how to prompt the AI platforms to give you what you need. But then we're going to teach you how to trust but verify and go back and look at it and evaluate whether or not what AI produced was actually, like, is it reliable? Is it not? What's missing? what edits need to have, because it's not perfect. If you've ever tried to write something with it, it's interesting. My son, who's in college, and I'm not ratting him out, but he had a paper due. And I said, well, are you going to use AI? And he was like, it's due. I'm really thinking about it. I said, okay, but just trust but verify. Like, do it. Trust but verify. Mm-hmm. And he was like, he called me. He's like, I used it. He's like, but you were right. He's like, there were so many things in there that, based on some of the sources that I had looked at and I had read, like, it wasn't quite correct. Like, I needed to go back and make it reflect what the research was showing, because it can't get that deep. And I'm not saying it won't ever get there. I fully believe it will.
Yeah.
But so how do we start to do that, right? As leaders, we have to start using it and modeling that for our teacher leaders so that our teacher leaders adopt it, right? So whether that's in lesson planning, whether that's in communications, how do we start to train ourselves that we're using it in a safe way, in a way that is responsible? We're learning about it, staying ahead of the curve so we can anticipate what's coming next to empower our instructional staff to use it. And then how are we then taking it and teaching kids to be responsible and use it as well? It is scary. It's something different that's out there. Kids are not like when I was in college, I spent hours in the library surrounded by 15 books trying to find the resources to write things. That's never going to be their reality, ever. And if we keep trying to think that that's the only way that you can write, that you can produce ideas and create, we might as well pack up shop, right? Because that's not it. What if, right? What if AI could help us be more creative? What if it could help us to become more curious? What if AI is the tool that we needed to save us time so that we can innovate faster and better? Like those are the questions we need to ask, like with that optimistic curiosity going into it, that will change our approach and how we use it, in my belief. So I'll pause for a second because I've said a lot and I could keep saying, but I keep meeting educators who are just, they want to talk about the negatives of AI. And I've always kind of been, and I teach this in our academies, more of an opportunity driven leader. Absolutely. Like what opportunity lies in there? Like, what could we use it for? Like, where is the opportunity? And I get it. When they sit down to take the assessment, they've got to write an essay. They're not going to have AI. Not yet.
Right.
Not yet.
Right. Right.
But as it grows and that we become more dependent on it, they might be.
Absolutely.
How do we create them to be good discerners, right? How do we help them to read and make good decisions on what it produces? So I think that's where we are. And we see that with TikTok and things like that. We have kids who don't know how to verify and validate and discern. They see it, so therefore it is.
Right.
And we've got to teach them that that's not always the case.
Great answer, Amy. Great answer, because, you're absolutely right. It's only going to improve, right? And whether we contextualize it as ASI, artificial superintelligence, or AGI, now we're seeing Chat 4.0 that is just launched. These large language models where process engineering is going to be a part of the everyday vernacular, should be a part of the everyday vernacular in the ecosystem. I last saw, I can't remember where it was. I was reading, you know how I read so much, Amy. I was reading an article where now, by the end of 2024 or 2025, depending on the acceleration of the actual coding and algorithms and everything, there will be avatars that can emulate us, the humans, up to 90% accuracy. Now, when you talk about testing and training various models around an avatar that can emulate us and have this digital figure that can be Amy and Michael, wow. So when you say yes, we have to start learning how to embrace it. We really do. I highlighted is that we can't continue to educate our kids in Blockbuster, right? When they're going out and
my favorite line you said.
Come on now. Blockbuster. Amy, I grew up during Blockbuster. I love Blockbuster.
Friday night Blockbuster. You go.
There you go.
You went out. You got a pizza. You went to Blockbuster.
Absolutely.
You hoped you got there early enough to get the early release or the new release.
There you go. The new releases. You were right there with the new releases, right? You had to be there. But the late charges, man, those were expensive. But anyway, you are so right about that. And we have to look at it from this opportunity mindset, right? And what are the key opportunities to now enhance and lever creativity, enhance curiosity? When we talk about it from an instructional sense, how are we able now to truly get to students' zones of proximal development where students can't get to because of the natural ability of AI, creating that equilibrium between the two? But now, Amy, I want to kind of branch it up, right? We've talked about classroom instruction. We've talked about pedagogy. I want to now move into school improvement, right?
Yeah.
And when we think about interpretations that elicit innovation, right? School improvement, change management. You talked about this a little bit with Cotter's work with the 8 stages of change, that vision, the Gaia coalition that we always talk about. But the interpretations that elicit innovation, now I see replication in lieu of innovation, right? And when we see that, the impact is not as there because of the demographics, because of school and conditional context, because of sociographics. We're not taking into consideration for alignment purposes with school improvement. If I see Amy is, hypothetically, in the Midwest, and I see this, I'm just going to, replicate it and supplant it in the East, right? Where we have to take into consideration of those factors. But the strategies, Amy, are there for innovation. How do we improve that? But, with the new demands of the AC stage that have been accelerated because of COVID-19, how should learning organizations and leaders leverage meaningful and relevant school improvement strategies to elevate? And I'm going to use this word in an abstract form, Amy, and I really want you to bring it down to this granular level, right? How can we elevate the effectiveness of instructional leadership?
That is a great question. So here's what I would say. I think the biggest part about school improvement, like when we look at it, looking at lessons learned with great innovative bold leaders and things, when you do that and you study different leaders, and I got the opportunity to do that with the University of Virginia at Arlington last year, and to write a paper with them, and to look at systems leaders and the ones that there are some very, very common through lines that these leaders have, whether they were working on, career and pathways and post-secondary pathways, or whether they were working on retention or recruitment or in any type of innovation. When you dig down to the core of what they were, they had a vision, they created a strategic plan, they had frameworks, right? A theory, some clear frameworks that they put in place that they could then test and follow. Yeah. And the one thing that I think that we miss out on a lot of times in leadership, when we're trying to transform or we're trying to innovate, we forget to put in the metrics of how are we going to check and make sure that what we want to have happen is happen. Absolutely. And then what do we do when it's not? Like, what we put things into place and then we just expect it to run like a racehorse, right? Instead of stopping periodically and saying what's working, what's not working, what do we need to stop, start, and fix right now? Like, let's look at the places now within our organization where things are working, and constantly coming back to that framework and refining it so that you can then replicate and scale.
Yeah.
We forget about scalability a lot, right? Or we see something happening in a district of one size and then think that we can make it happen in another district without thinking about in terms of scalability and resources. So I think that's really important. What leaders need frameworks. We've got to have frameworks that help to guide our decision making, frameworks that help us. And sometimes a framework that works for me, Michael, and my leadership might not work for you. And that's okay. But you could look at a framework that I have, and here's how I approach it, and say, okay, but this is a tweak that for my leadership style I need to do. instead of entering into things blindly or saying, okay, well, what programs did you purchase and who did this and who did that? It's not about those pieces. It's about the structure and the framework underneath Absolutely. It. And that's what we need to build. So for true instructional leadership and for us to really have an impact, we've got to put the frameworks in place, the systems, if you want to call them, but with the checks and balances that are constantly helping us refine and tweak, and knowing that though a framework worked in this context, it might not in this one, right? And revisiting it frequently. And also to really make an impact, having the right people at the table who will tell us the truth. That will say, this is not working, or we're struggling. Yeah. Like, here's when you can push and here's when you need to support, right? And giving us that honest feedback to let us know those things. So we're not stepping into mines all the time. So I think those are the two things. You'll never be able to replace that with AI. People right. that will tell you the truth and that will help you to navigate, and having really strong frameworks in place that will help you to guide your decision making. So I tell leaders all the time when it comes to instruction, I can tell you what you value by looking at where you spend your time and where you spend your money.
Absolutely.
So if you're spending your time building up people and focus on sustainability and frameworks that will outlive you.
Absolutely.
Long past the time you leave, then you can have true sustainable change and transformation.
Absolutely. Amy, this is my listeners, please, and I love to bring on the brightest and smartest minds on VFE. This is truly one of the episodes that, if I'm a leader at any level, I am playing this episode over and over and over and over again, because you can be able to test your implemented practices, the theory, the concepts, and be able to go against it so that you can strengthen your own individual leadership repertoire, whether it be from a systems design standpoint, whether it be defining the shared model around what instructional rigor is within your schools and within your districts. But more importantly, right, Amy's last answer just gave a really good, simplified, understandable, digestible definition of strategic performance management. When you look at strategic performance management, two critical elements Amy highlighted: scalability and sustainability, right? Long-lasting, Amy said it, long-lasting after you leave. And that is why we do this work, is so that we can be able to scale and sustain systems that can be redefined, that can be a level of adaptation. Amy talked about it, where I think is a missing element to my listeners and viewers, that progress monitoring, that project management piece of your strategic plan. So, Amy, thank you for that, because again, one of the dynamics of strategic performance management is implementation, monitoring, adjusting, and pivoting and abandoning when necessary. That last element, Amy, of performance management is not really implemented to this level of, I like to say, fidelity and with integrity, where even where it comes back to, Amy, when we want it, like you said, to go as a racehorse and it doesn't, where are those intermediate metrics or those intermediate checkpoints where we could have been able to pick that up before? Thank you, Amy, for that. So, Amy, I know we can talk about 3 hours, but this is the last question. And I don't know if I can do this, Amy, because I know you personally, I know you professionally. Wow. So all I'm just going to say is this: take this last question as it is, because I try to limit leaders to only 3 words. I'm not, Amy, I'm not even successful with that, right?
Okay.
And when we talk about this question, leaders become innovative. You got 3 times 3. You got 3 squared. You got 3 plus 1,000 words, 3.5 words with explanation. So, Amy, I'm going to say this. Do you on this question? All right.
Okay.
What 3 words do you want today's audience to leave our podcast episode with regarding achieving all, all in the AC stage of education? What three words do I need for success to meet the mandates of Delta 2030 and all in this?
Is that 6 words then? Because there's three and two.
Innovation and creativity, right?
Okay.
Podcast rigor, creativity.
There you go. All right. So I'll tell you, okay, this is what I think. My favorite word, and the word that I think is synonymous with really great leaders, is intention. Intentionality. It is all about intention, setting intention, doing what you say you're going to do and following through with intention, approaching everything with intention. Like it doesn't happen to you. It happens because you intended it to happen and when it happens. So attention is a big one. Curiosity is another one. Yeah. Like you as the leader must remain curious at all times. Absolutely. To be the lead learner on your campus or in your district, to constantly be challenging what you know about everything. Absolutely. Right? Curiosity. This is so hard, Michael. Okay, so I'm torn between a couple of words. And I'll tell you why. Two of them I think kind of go together. One is the two that I think go closely together is courage and disruption, because I think we have to be courageous enough to cause disruption in order to make change. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is not good. I should just stick with my 3 words and move on. But persistence is another one. You've got to push. You just got to, and for lack of a cheesy way to bring it back to, but you got to get gritty. You just got to be persistent and get gritty. So I would say intention, curiosity. I'll take 4: intention, curiosity, courage, and persistence.
Amy, I got attention, curiosity, courage, disruption, persistence, and the last word, gritty.
Yeah, I'll take all of them.
There we go. Right, we can say we just had to expand on it. Right, when we look at the math instructional shifts, I was asking for procedural fluency. You really gave a great example of conceptual understanding. Amy, thank you so very much. If my listeners or viewers want to get in contact with you, if they want to engage in one of your academies or institutes, how will they be able to find you and get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I'm on X, whatever we're calling it now, Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. So you can just Google my name. But also on our website, which is daLeadershipInstitute.com. All of our opportunities for leaders are on there. And that's a great way. We've got a nice contact us form. They'll get you in touch with me. My amazing team is great about doing that. So it has been an absolute honor. I hope that we can work together to impact more leaders and students' lives. That's the goal.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this to my listeners and viewers. I have participated in DA at pretty much every level as a superintendent. And then now, just most recently spoke at the last DA Institute, which is great. I highly, my leaders out there, highly recommend it. One of the academies, one of the institutes. Once you get in and experience one, you will want to experience 10 more, because it is that contagious and that invigorating. Amy, my friend, thank you so very much for being a guest. I tell you, I got 4 pages of notes just from this episode. And I know that once it's officially launched, I'm actually going to go back and listen to this again, because you highlighted so many great points that can impact the field. And of course, your work and your vision. Thank you again for everything you do.
Thank you, Michael. It's truly an honor.
Absolutely. And on that note, onward and upward, everybody. Have a great day.